Joe Rogan didn't wake up one day and decide to fight the media. The fight came to him. For decades, mainstream media controlled the narrative, what people should believe, what they should fear, and who they should trust. TV anchors spoke, audiences listened, questions were rare. Then, podcasts happened. Joe Rogan sat down, pressed record, and did something dangerous. He let people talk. Long conversations, unfiltered ideas, no time limits, no scripted conclusions. Millions tuned in, not because Rogan told them what to think, but because he let them think for themselves. That's when the headline started. Joe Rogan spreads misinformation. Joe Rogan is dangerous. Joe Rogan must be stopped. CNN, MSNBC, legacy media outlets, all pointing fingers at one man with a microphone. But here's the real question. Was Joe Rogan attacking the media, or was he exposing what they had become? This is not just Joe Rogan versus CNN. This is independent voices versus controlled narratives. This is a podcast versus an entire media empire. And this war is only just beginning. Mainstream media had its golden era. For decades, they shaped reality. The evening news dictated the day's events. Editors decided which stories mattered, which voices were heard, and which ideas were ignored. Anchor desks were thrones. The microphone was power. The audience? Passive, obedient, and dependent. Then Joe Rogan appeared on the horizon, not with a press badge, not with decades of journalism, but with curiosity, a microphone, and a camera. What started as casual chats with comedians, MMA fighters, and friends slowly evolved. It became unfiltered, raw, and real. People craved it, not because Rogan was perfect, not because he had all the answers, but because he allowed discussion, debate, and exploration without an editor's filter. And that frightened mainstream media. They didn't just see a podcaster, they saw a platform reaching tens of millions of Americans in a single week. A platform where politicians could bypass traditional press conferences, where viewers could hear ideas unedited, where the audience wasn't told what to think, but encouraged to think for themselves. Social media amplified this threat. YouTube, Facebook, X. Suddenly, Rogan's episodes weren't just podcasts, they were viral events. Clips of long conversations condensed into explosive highlights. Every view, every share, every comment chipped away at the influence of traditional outlets. And the attacks began. Headlines screamed, opinion pieces questioned his credibility, analysts debated, was he journalism, entertainment, dangerous misinformation? The truth was more complicated. Rogan didn't claim to be perfect. He didn't promise factual precision. He simply gave a stage, and the stage had power. Mainstream media responded with panic. Panels dissected his every word, experts criticized, commentators warned, and journalists scrutinized. They called it misinformation, they called it bias. But Rogan's audience didn't leave, they multiplied. By 2025, research showed almost a quarter of the U.S. population had consumed news or commentary from Joe Rogan in a single week. Social media wasn't just entertainment anymore. It was the new front line in the battle for public opinion. Younger generations tuned in. The old guard of print and television struggled to retain relevance. Their influence waned as personality-driven media rose. Podcasters like Rogan, influencers, and AI news tools captured audiences mainstream outlets couldn't reach. This wasn't an accident. Rogan didn't set out to destroy legacy media. He simply existed in a space they no longer understood: authenticity, curiosity, and unfiltered conversation. The battle lines were clear. On one side, centuries of editorial control, brand authority, and institutional trust. On the other, a man with a microphone, a camera, and an audience that refused to be told what to believe. And as social platforms grew, so did the war. Every clip Rogan shared, every guest interviewed, every controversial idea explored was a strike against the dominance of traditional media. This wasn't just a clash of personalities, it was a clash of systems, old versus new, gatekeepers versus freedom of speech, scripted narratives versus long-form conversations. The question wasn't whether Rogan could compete. The question was whether mainstream media could survive. Because the audience had found a new voice, unfiltered, unpredictable, and unstoppable. And the fight was only just beginning. Mainstream media relied on authority, anchors in suits, graphics on screen, polished delivery. It all signaled credibility. They told viewers what to care about, how to feel, and even what to think. Joe Rogan offered something different. No scripts, no teleprompters, no corporate filters, just a microphone, a camera, and conversations that went wherever curiosity led. Politics, science, health, culture, nothing was off limits. Audiences noticed, especially young Americans, those under 35, tired of hearing curated narratives and talking points, began turning to social platforms for news. YouTube, X, TikTok, spaces where content was immediate, raw, and often unedited. Rogan became the poster child of this new era. Clips from his podcast spread like wildfire. Views skyrocketed. In the week following the 2025 inauguration, nearly 20% of Americans reported seeing news or commentary from Rogan. Compare that to traditional media, and the gap was undeniable. Politicians began noticing too. Interviews with Rogan offered access to an audience mainstream media could no longer reach. They could bypass challenging questions, avoid editorial gatekeeping, and speak directly to millions of engaged viewers. Traditional journalists were alarmed. Panels, editorials, and talk shows dissected Rogan's every word. Was it misinformation? Was it journalism? Was it dangerous? But the more they tried to label him, the more attention he gained. Mainstream media was losing its monopoly on influence, the power of the editor, the anchor, the newsroom, all challenged by one podcast host willing to let conversation flow naturally. The shift wasn't just numbers, it was cultural. Trust in traditional news remained, but the reliance on it was waning. Young people increasingly turned to personalities rather than institutions. They wanted context, they wanted discussion, and most of all, they wanted to feel included in the conversation. Rogan's audience was diverse, but skewed younger and right-leaning. Mainstream outlets often dismissed these viewers as unreachable, but Rogan engaged them authentically. He asked questions, explored ideas, and allowed listeners to form their own conclusions. And that authenticity threatened the old system. Panels, editorials, and news anchors couldn't compete with hours of long-form, unfiltered conversation. The war between personality-driven platforms and traditional outlets had escalated. Joe Rogan wasn't just a podcaster. He was a signal that media consumption had changed forever. The battle for attention, credibility, and influence was no longer in studios with bright lights and polished scripts. It was on microphones, cameras, and social feeds. Every episode, every clip, every viral moment was a reminder. The old rules no longer applied, and mainstream media was scrambling to catch up. The fight for influence was intensifying, and Joe Rogan had already proven he could dominate the conversation. The war for the public's attention had entered a new era, and it was only getting louder. Mainstream media felt the pressure. Anchors spoke with urgency, headlines screamed for attention, and panels debated fiercely, but the audience was slipping through their fingers. The polished delivery, the carefully curated narratives, even the dramatic graphics, they weren't enough anymore. People wanted something real, something raw. Joe Rogan gave them that. A laugh, a pause, a controversial question, moments that felt human, moments that resonated. Listeners laughed, gasped, debated, argued in comments, shared clips with friends. Every reaction built a connection. It wasn't just content, it was community. Young Americans especially were captivated. They felt understood, seen, and heard in ways mainstream media had never offered. The frustration with traditional outlets, the talking points, the filtered reporting, the constant spin became palpable. Social media exploded with reactions, memes, debates, clips of Rogan leaning into a mic, eyes focused, questions sharp. They spread like wildfire. Rogan's influence wasn't cold or calculated, it was emotional. Every moment of curiosity, disbelief, surprise, or laughter invited the audience into the conversation. People weren't passive, they were invested. Hearts raced during heated debates, smiles grew during funny anecdotes, and some even felt outrage when tough topics surfaced. Politicians noticed too. Interviews with traditional news programs felt stiff compared to Rogan's relaxed yet probing style. Viewers trusted the experience more than the headline, and the line between news and entertainment blurred. Rogan's influence became undeniable, a platform where hearts and minds engaged simultaneously, and where conversation drove action. Every viral clip, every unexpected laugh, every serious debate reminded viewers this was real, this was raw, this was human. Mainstream media, with all its polish and prestige, could no longer compete with connection. And in the end, the message was clear. The future of news and influence wasn't dictated by anchors in studios, it was shaped by platforms that understood emotion, curiosity, and the power of genuine conversation. Rogan had found the formula, and the world was watching, listening, and feeling every moment. Mainstream media tried to push back. Headlines screamed, opinion panels argued endlessly, and primetime anchors debated infinitely. But the truth was clear. The audience was shifting. People craved authenticity, curiosity, and conversations that didn't feel scripted. Joe Rogan's podcast offered exactly that. Each episode pulled viewers into a world of raw dialogue, unfiltered, unpredictable, and deeply human. Guests shared stories, laughed, disagreed, and sometimes shocked, but it always felt real. Every pause, every question, every reaction created a connection that algorithms or glossy studios could never replicate. Audiences didn't just watch, they participated. They clipped moments, debated them online, and shared their reactions across social platforms. Social feeds became living communities of conversation where emotions ran high: excitement, disbelief, laughter, and even anger. The younger generation especially felt heard. They weren't just consuming content, they were living it. Traditional outlets struggled to adapt. The more they tried to control narratives, the more people turned elsewhere. Facts alone were no longer enough. Emotion, engagement, relatability, these were the currencies of attention. Rogan mastered them effortlessly, creating loyalty that transcended channels or networks. Politicians took notice too. Interviews with traditional news programs felt stiff compared to Rogan's relaxed yet probing style. Viewers trusted the experience more than the headline, and the line between news and entertainment blurred. Rogan's influence became undeniable, a platform where hearts and minds engaged simultaneously, and where conversation drove action. Every viral clip, every unexpected laugh, every serious debate reminded viewers this was real, this was raw, this was human. Mainstream media, with all its polish and prestige, could no longer compete with connection. And in the end, the message was clear. The future of news and influence wasn't dictated by anchors in studios, it was shaped by platforms that understood emotion, curiosity, and the power of genuine conversation. Rogan had found the formula, and the world was watching, listening, and feeling every moment. And now the story comes full circle. Joe Rogan's rise from a fringe podcaster to a mainstream media powerhouse isn't just about numbers or views. It's about connection. Millions of viewers felt seen, heard, and engaged in a way traditional media had long forgotten. Every episode sparked conversation, debate, and reflection, proving that authenticity resonates far more than scripted narratives. Mainstream media may still dominate headlines, but the world has changed. Audiences now seek platforms where curiosity, emotion, and dialogue reign supreme, where they can question, laugh, and learn all at once. Rogan's influence reminds us that media isn't just about reporting facts, it's about shaping culture, fostering engagement, and igniting ideas that spread globally. This isn't the end. It's a movement, a shift in how we consume, interpret, and trust information. Rogan versus the media isn't just a clash of platforms, it's a clash of philosophies, curated authority versus genuine dialogue, polished scripts versus raw conversation, tradition versus evolution. And here in the classroom, every viewer gains insight, perspective, and a deeper understanding of the battle for attention, trust, and influence. You've witnessed how one voice can challenge giants, spark discussion, and redefine an industry. So as the video ends, remember, knowledge is power, perspective is everything, and here in the classroom, every story leaves you a little smarter, a little wiser, and thoroughly impressed.